Hey everyone, I'm Rather Incoherent, and today I want to talk about Norman Withers for a little while. I've played him before, but I played him before the Scarlet Keys came out, and I think maybe I was a little bit underestimating what I previously played and severely underestimating how much of a buff he got. But I want to talk about why I think Norman's possibly overrated by the community a little bit before I move on to all the buffs he got and why I think he's much stronger now than he used to be. Norman Withers is always going to be a good character. He's got 4 in his head, 5 in book, and infinite level 0 seeker cards. That's strong at level 0. You're going to do work no matter what with this character. The question is really just how much do upgraded mystic cards actually give you? Because that's all you're upgrading in. You aren't getting your upgraded seeker cards. There's no deduction level 2. There's nothing like that. And you can't get the mystic bonus experience because if you're using arcane research, you can only fit 3 other spells in your deck at level 0 at least. If you're using down the rabbit hole, you're buying all new experience cards because again, you didn't have level 0 versions. So if he's not getting the bonus experience of mystic and he's only a 4-head mystic, how much work is he really going to get done out of those upgrades? That's the big question. Now, coming over to an 8 experience deck, I know it says 9, but that's because I'm running a copy of Refine. Later, I plan on just adding a second copy of Summoned Servitor to my deck for 1 additional experience, but if you want to save that experience, you can cut a Guts or a Shortcut now. But this is an 8 experience deck, and the 8 experience goes towards a double Astronomical Atlas, double Foresight. Foresight is obviously just incredible. It's draw a card, gain 2 resources fast on Norman, and Astronomical Atlas allows you to infinitely loop deductions by alternating the ability on Astronomical Atlas with Libera Ivan. And over here, you have Research Librarian and just normal Seeker Draw as well to make sure you get all of this stuff happening very, very quickly. This deck comes off the ground very, very fast. Within the thick of it, you only need 5 experience from Scenario 1 to be fully online, and really you only need 3 because the Foresights are much, much more optional than the Astronomical Atlases are. One of the huge arguments in favor of Norman Withers is that he comes online faster than other Seekers. And I don't actually think that's true. Like, don't get me wrong, this is a very, very strong deck for 9 experience. But there are plenty of Seekers that come online just as fast. Like, if you look at a Rex deck, I've bought Charisma to run Leo DeLuca, and I bought Hiking Boots and Pathfinder to walk faster. But these could have been anything. The Rex deck doesn't need anything. He's getting deduction every turn already. He's just got what Norman's building towards already. Norman's up 1 book and down 7 experience, as well as splash cards and upgraded seeker cards. And I know Rex is one of the best characters in the game. If I'm saying Norman is worse than Rex, that's not really saying much. That puts Norman in a pretty good spot if that's one of the few ways I can criticize him. But coming over to a Mandy deck, she's also got 5 books. She's also got good defensive stats. And sure, she's not looping deduction infinitely, but she's still playing a very strong toolbox deck. We're at 8 experience, you vault Sharp Visions, Unrelenting, Crossroads, and Beast. And between the dilemmas and the new skills, you're just getting a lot of draw and a lot of additional value. Is this worse than Norman? A little bit, yeah, but it's very comparable to Norman. And Mandy's no longer one of the best Seekers. This is just a very good toolbox deck. Coming over to Harvey. Again, he'll be getting less clues, but he'll be looping his deck faster, so it's not as many or less as it seems like, because he will be getting more than 2 deductions a deck cycle. He'll be expecting to see at least 4 deductions in a given game, up to 6 or 8 even. He's running Working a Hunch in addition to that. He's got a lot of economy to allow Working a Hunch to work. That economy is also for Occult Lexicon, because unlike Norman, he's actually a flex fighter. He just has the card draw on the economy to use Lexicon as a weapon. And also, unlike Norman, he's basically invincible, and you can't really die on this Harvey deck. You have 2 Mr. Rooks that are expendable, you're drawing them constantly, you have Bulletproof Vest. You're not gonna die here. It's not a thing that happens. So you're invincible, you're flex fighting, you're getting clues a little bit slower, but not much slower. And coming back to the Norman comparison deck, I've said he's on par with an A+ character and Mandy, and that he's notably behind, in my opinion, of multiple different S tier characters. Now, that still means that Norman's really, really good early. I agree with that. But to say that he's coming online faster than other Seekers is inaccurate, because there are like half the Seekers coming online at the same speed or faster than him. Harvey doesn't need Farsight to be doing comparable stuff to Norman. He just doesn't. That is not real. The deck is still great at 8 experience though. That's absolutely true, and he does beat out about half the Seekers in terms of early game power levels. So the question is, if he's doing way better in early scenarios, which I definitely care about, in my tier list, so many green characters, especially parallel skids, got brought down by the early game scenarios. If you started scenario 3, if you just skipped the first 2 scenarios and began scenario 3 with how much experience you would have gotten in them, Jenny would be in S tier. Like, that's how much the early scenarios hold her down. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Green Man Medallion is an alternate card for her, and she'll be starting Scenario 3 with an additional 16 experience, or something like that. It'll be less depending on the campaign, but it's something like Carcosa it's just discussed. Anyways, getting back on topic, Norman Withers, really, really good in these early scenarios, and that brings him up in the tier list some. So the question is, how good is he going to get later? Because in the past, this was basically the whole deck. Whatever you did after this didn't really matter. One of the cooler ways to build Norman in the past was actually to give up on Astronomical Atlas and go hard into support. It's a very cheap build still. You run Seal the 7th sign. It's going to seal the auto fail, and then after enough symbol tokens have been revealed, it's going to go away. 7 charges, 7 symbols, doesn't matter who or where they're drawn. But you run Protective Incantation to seal one of those face tokens, and 2 copies of Chthonian Stolens to seal 2 more of those face tokens. And the Chthonian Stolens don't go away because you never see an auto fail. Protective Incantation just costs you a money. That's not a big deal at all. You get that every turn. You can make sure that happens. And this is a deck where you reduce the deck's symbols down to basically just like 2 or 3 symbols, probably skulls, and there's no autofill anymore, and it's a huge amount of team support in addition to getting some clues. Now, you don't fight for shit. This is really a 3 or 4 player exclusive deck, because if you're in 2 player, you want to get clues harder than this, and your fighter shouldn't have a very hard time doing 2 people fighting. But this is a very cool support Norman that was one of my favorite decks in the game, but I no longer think it's the best build of Norman, not even close. Let's come over to the new Norman, the best user of Summoned Servitor, and weirdly enough Ghastly Possession despite not being a Doom character. Looping level 0 deduction is nice, you get 1 clue a turn. There are a million ways to do that, it's not that impressive, but it is very good, even if it becomes somewhat the standard when looking at Seekers. Deduction's always gonna be a fine thing to loop at Astronomical Atlas, it's a clue a turn, but Ghastly Possession is way, way better, because we're gonna run Divination now. You take the second option every time on the Divination test, and if you succeed, you replenish half of the uses rounded down. Divination has 6 uses, so you can use 3 at a time, so it basically gives you an entire use of Divination every time you pass with it. So essentially, now you're getting 2 clues instead of 1. It's a big upgrade. That's a very direct upgrade, and it does help him a little bit, but honestly, not like a game-changing amount. This is still pretty in line with how I viewed old Norman. The big thing that changes this is the Summoned Servitor. The Summoned Servitor is really, really good. Armored Carapace for Health Soak means you no longer need to run Deny Exist since you just have enough Soak that you should be fine. Eyes of Flame is wonderful. It lets you investigate at base 4. That's 1 less than you normally have, but you're able to run things to help that. Specifically, we're running St. Hubert's Key and Dr. Milan to get that to be base 6. And no, that's not great at cracking high shroud locations, but it can go to a low shroud location and crack that. And I do mean it can go to it. This doesn't have to be at your location, it can go anywhere. One of the coolest things about the Servitor is that you don't actually have to go to locations to clear it if you have Eyes of Flame. You can just send the Servitor over to a 2 or 3 shroud location, and it will eventually finish it on its own. Now, ideally, one of them will be with you, because after it moves, you can move with it as well. Wings of Night gives you mobility that Norman previously didn't have. And with all the stuff we're talking about doing, we clearly want the capstone, we want the 5 experience. Summoned Servitor can take 2 different actions instead of 1 during each of your turns. You'll notice Wings of Night actually doesn't have any stipulations about how many times it can be used per turn, which means that you could theoretically line up your Summoned Servitors to move you 4 times in 1 turn without actually needing to pay any cost. That doesn't come up ever, but the fact that Norman's gone from one of the least mobile to one of the most mobile goes a long way to explain just why I think he got so buffed. And of course, since we're using Divination, we will have to take Dominance to get him to stop taking up this Arcane slot. That's not something we're allowed to accept. And as for the asset you have to sacrifice just to put this in play, Lab Assistants and Research Librarians are here to get value and die. They're also here to help us find the cards we need, like Atlas and Servitor. And I genuinely think Servitor and Ghastly Possession do a tremendous amount to elevate this deck as main Kluver. I think if you are playing main Kluver, upgrading from 1 clue a turn to 2 clues a turn is a massive, massive upgrade. Upgrading from no mobility to best mobility in the game is massive, and it's not just that. You can send them off, you can send both of them to a 4 shroud location, and in like 1 or 2 turns, they'll finish it without you ever going there, which even though you're not getting Wings of Night, is still movement for you because you don't have to go there and come back anymore. Ideally, you always keep one with you to use Wings of Night, and the other one's to be killing low shroud locations without you, which is just absolutely sick. There are definitely turns you'll have with this Norman where you just investigate 7 times. It's like big money green decks, and that's a good place to be. Now, there is an argument for playing a Flex Norman, for using this Astronomical Atlas stuff to handle your clues and then running Mystic Fight assets. I don't like that Norman. I tried really hard to find a way to build that I liked, where I started with level 0 Seeker stuff to fight and I transitioned into like higher level Shriveling and also Brand of Cthulhu. But the way I felt playing those decks, or not even playing those decks, the way I felt building them when I look at level 0 is that Norman cannot be a remotely competent fighter at level 0 unless you're cutting things like Promise of Power and Hubert's Key, which you need for the other builds. So you end up with a level 0 deck that can't really fight very well, and then you upgrade to fight better. Which means one of two things. At level 0, your team is either really upset that you aren't fighting more, or in later scenarios, your team doesn't really care that you're fighting more. And either way, he ends up being a flex character that wasn't necessary or that wasn't doing what they needed to do. So I dislike flex builds like that, where you wildly diverge in just how much value you're going to be getting from scenario to scenario based on your team comp. Now, I've been talking about Norman exclusively so far, but I do want to talk about Gloria now. A character that was already insane and didn't need any buffs from Scarlet Keys, but uses Summoned Servitor very well. Now, normally with Mystics, I tell you they're better as Clover or they're better as Flex, because as main fighter, they lack movement tech. This Gloria deck can be anything, it doesn't need to be a Clover, because Summoned Servitor gives it that mobility, just like it does for Norman. Personally, I still think you should play Clover or Flex, and the reason for that is because, just like I said with Norman just now, that he doesn't fight well in Scenario 1, so you either need more fighting then, or the fighting you get later doesn't matter. You won't have this Summoned Servitor doing its job in Scenario 1. So I'd rather not play her as main fighter, though you can really just swap these over to kill assets and be good. You can find somewhere to cut stuff, the Uncage the Soul for instance, for Cyclopean Hammers. There's ways to transfer this over to fighting very easily since you now have the movement. Transferring over to Flex is a little bit harder, because the best way to Flex is with Cyclopean Hammer in your hands and Clue Finding in your Arcanes. So, like, you have to sacrifice something somewhere. It gets a little bit jankier as Flex. I think the smoothest, easiest way to build Gloria is as a Clover, but you can really build her as anything. It's honestly probably not going to be the biggest difference in the world if you play her as Flex or Fighter. She's still going to be an S tier because the thing she's doing that's broken is Scroll of Secrets and Alyssa Graham and her ability, but now she has Summoned Servitor, and it is the exact same Summoned Servitor that you saw on Norman. You get 3 Meat Soak, you don't need Deny 5 anymore. In addition, you get to investigate at base 4 a lot. You know what? That's what Gloria was already at, and Gloria's running St. Hubert's Key and Alyssa Graham to get that up to 6, just like Norman. It's the exact same major buff. She's probably not really moving in the tier list as a result of this because she's already right at the top pretty much, but she did get a substantial buff out of this. The mobility on Gloria is greatly appreciated. And the additional clue finding power. This is not as big of a deal as Ghastly Possession and Divination 4, but it's still a meaningful increase in clue finding speed for Gloria, and she's just a very, very strong character now. Anyways, I think I've talked enough. Gloria got a big buff from Summoned Servitor, but Norman got a much more relevant buff from his Summoned Servitor because it's more in line with what he was already doing in addition to getting Ghastly Possession for that same goal. I think Clover and Norman has moved up substantially in my tier list now that I realized just how much of a buff he got from Scarlet Keys, and I'm really looking forward to playing him again. I'm done for now though. I've been rather incoherent. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, like, comment, subscribe. All that stuff really does help the channel grow, and I'll see you in the next one.